So what's it actually like operating an old military Jeep on a day-to-day basis? It might not be as bad as you think, depending on what you want to do with it, and it might be worse. So today we're going to have a look around this 1988 J23 and maybe compare it a little bit with some contemporary vehicles and how it is to live with the thing on a daily basis. If you've already seen my walk around video, then you already know something about the features of the vehicle or the lack of. But if you haven't, maybe check that out first, and that'll be in the link which should appear right there. Okay, so just for general considerations, this is a truck. It's not an SUV, it's not a car. It doesn't have any doors, it doesn't have any other lockable space except for this very simple toolbox under the driver's seat right there. That's it. You can fit a lunchbox in there and a few tools, a few small things. It's not much space. Factory security option, ferocious guard dog. Weather protection, you're a little bit better off than being on a motorcycle. The canvas tarps, they're water resistant, but after enough rain, they leak. If it's light rain and it's falling vertically, you can stay fairly dry for a while. But once it gets into heavier rain, and once it gets very windy, you're getting wet. Comfort. It's not very comfortable. The seats are well enough padded, but they're not very adjustable. You can adjust them for angle a slight bit. The passenger seat on this one, it moves a small amount, but it's not a lot. This is the car that gives you what they call the African massage. Safety considerations. Well, this is from 1988. Maybe in a comparable SUV, you would have things like airbags, you'd have a padded interior, you'd have a collapsible steering column. This has none of that. The brakes, drum brakes all around, no ABS, no traction control, no stability control, nothing. You're on your own. You have a rigid steering column. There's no airbag. Nothing in the dash is padded. There is, surprisingly, this inertia reel seatbelt and the patented safety side restraint system. Both of those added together, they don't have to go around looking for the bodies after a crash. Cargo space is quite impressive at over 2,000 liters. Because we don't have any interior trim to speak of, there are no subwoofers, there's no spare inside, there are no side curtain airbags, none of that stuff. So the space is very large and it's very regularly shaped. By comparison, a Mazda CX-3 has only about 1,200 liters of cargo space, and a Jimny only has about 500 kilograms. The J23 can carry 250 kilograms of cargo, and that's on top of a fully fueled vehicle plus a driver and co-pilot. I don't think too many modern SUVs, compact SUVs, can carry that much weight. Let's face it, 0 to 60 time is not why you own one of these. They claimed it will get 0 to 100 kilometers in about 18 seconds, and top speed is, in theory, 122 kilometers per hour. Personally, I do not drive this one beyond 100 kilometers per hour ever, and I usually cruise at much less. Its real performance character is seen climbing hills. I can typically get under 8 liters per 100 kilometers in cruise. With a drag coefficient of 0.8, you don't cruise at high speed and get good mileage. On the trails, I can get that up to about 12 liters if I'm just wheeling all the time, but average over the last year is 9 liters per 100 kilometers. With a 45 liter fuel tank, maximum range is about 500 kilometers. This vehicle, which at time of manufacture had been in continuous production and steady, slow development for 35 years, is very well refined and extremely reliable. The wiring on these is straight old PVC. It's not this modern self-biodegradable plastic that just disappears and falls apart in 5 to 10 years. The wiring on this thing is 35 years old and it still works like new. This 4DR series engine by this time has also been in production for about 15 years, and slowly they are ironing all of the bugs out of it. They're making slow progress, improving strength and reliability. It's fitted to hundreds of thousands of Fuso and Canter trucks and forklift trucks, as well as this Jeep. So amongst the high-tech features of this vehicle, the climate control system, we have a central vent with different settings to adjust airflow, and then we have dual zone climate control. On each side we have independent vents which can allow more air into the vehicle on separate sides. Dual zone climate, that's a first in 1988. Single most complicated piece of equipment on this entire vehicle is actually the glow plug controller. It has 3 transistors and a couple of relays. That's it. There's no other vehicle electronics which can fail and render it immobile. Parts die of old age, parts fall off from driving it on very rutted roads, and parts rust and rot away. But in general, they don't break and it doesn't break down. It ended on these Jeeps in 1998, and along with it, production of spare parts. In 2014, the Japanese Self-Defense Force started to auction off these units, probably this one as well, and since then the stockpile of new parts has gone into the hands of a couple of traders. The stock that's available is a bit spotty. You can't get everything, but still quite a lot of parts are available. And luckily, a lot of the parts on the Jeep are common to other Fuso and Mitsubishi trucks, and they either fit straight up or they can be modified to fit. Luckily, I have a very good mechanic who supports a fleet of 35 units of J23s and J24s, and he's very experienced with fiddling other parts onto the platform. So far, in a year of ownership, I've replaced a water pump, 4 shock absorbers, a few light bulbs, and that's basically it. It's been very reliable so far. Okay, so for firing up, always make sure you're in neutral because there are no safety interlocks at all. Ignition is on and we wait for the glow plug light to go out. There's a very simple electronic timer there that just looks at the engine temperature and decides how long the glow plugs have to run for. It always cranks first time. You'll see that oil pressure very quickly goes up to about 3.5 bar, or maybe 4 if the engine is hot.
Acceleration is not mind-blowing, but it gets up to the speeds we drive at on this island quickly enough with its 20 kg-meters of torque. If you're used to independent suspension, coil springs, rack and pinion steering with power assistance and disc brakes, then the road manners are going to be a bit of a rude awakening. This unit is in good shape and the steering box backlash is within spec, but the slop in the steering wheel will put you off at first. The steering is quite direct and responsive, with none of that vague feeling from overly powerful power steering setups or electric power steering, at least when using modern radial tires. The brakes can work very well and the self-servo effect is very apparent, but they are prone to the influence of water and especially mud. So if you've been out wheeling, you want to be very careful going back onto the highway, as it might pull badly to one side or the other if the brakes on the other side are still full of mud. It has a very wide torque curve and gearing is tall, so you don't have to shift gears much on the open road. It will pull away very well from 45 kilometers per hour in top gear. In high ratio and fourth gear, there's about a 10% overdrive, so it's not horribly buzzy in cruise. By comparison, an 88 Pajero 3-door with the 2.6 litre gasoline engine was claimed to hit 140 kilometers per hour and did 0 to 100 kilometers in about 14 seconds and returned an average fuel consumption of 13.4 kilometers per 100 liters. The 1.3 litre Suzuki Samurai that appeared that year could boast a top speed of 130 kilometers per hour and hit 0 to 100 in 14.4 seconds, returning an average fuel consumption of 9.4 kilometers per 100 meters, which I think is very efficient. Meanwhile, the Land Rover Defender 90 of 1988 with its 2.5 litre gasoline engine managed a top speed of 115 kilometers per hour, took 21 seconds to hit 100 kilometers per hour, and averaged 17 kilometers per 100 liters. The Land Rover has the same toilet door aerodynamics as the J23, so no surprises there. With leaf springs and solid axles, washboard and corrugated surfaces are going to be uncomfortable at speed. If you want to do this all day, get a vehicle with coil springs and perhaps independent front suspension, or just get used to going very slowly. By comparison, an 88 Defender 90 has coil springs, suspension and a longer wheelbase and is much more comfortable on washboard. It's generous torque available at low RPM. Once you select four-wheel drive and low range, there isn't much that this thing won't climb up if you have the traction. There's an interlock to stop you selecting low ratio while in two-wheel drive, but there are no warning lights of any type for four-wheel drive or low ratio. The factory manual says that the Jeep will climb close to a 120% grade, which is a 50-degree slope. I don't know what grade the same year Samurai or Pajero, for example, would climb, because they never published claims for either of those vehicles. Land Rover advised a maximum climb slope angle of 45 degrees. Going down steep hills is really easy with the massive engine braking that's available in low ratio, which allows you to trickle down muddy, rocky slopes without using the brakes much, if at all. The steering is very direct and can be hard work on rocky trails. I've gotten a few bruised thumbs after forgetting not to hook them through the steering wheel. Remember, this is all mechanical. There's no electronics or aids or controls at work or to have to defeat. Suspension travel isn't that great, but at least the ground clearance is constant with the solid axles. Speaking of axles, these ones do not come with lockers. The transfer case locks the front and rear drive shafts together, but both the diffs are open. So if you have one wheel at each end with no traction, then you're sitting and spinning. Approach and departure angles are quite good, and the short wheelbase makes it quite good at rock hopping, though the tire diameter is a limiting factor. You cannot even fit 10.5-inch wide tires and be comfortable without power steering, and I'm not going into hacking the Jeep up in order to fit that.
So, in the spirit of a Doug DeMoro review, I'm going to give this Jeep an Uncle Les score. The weekend scores: cool factor 8, styling all-time classic. Okay, it's not as pretty as a Willys MB, but I'd say it's about second best, so it gets an 8. Acceleration, very poor, 1. Handling on the road is not fantastic. In the twisties, it's not chasing anybody down, and it gets a 1. However, off-road, it's very, very capable, and it gets a 6. As a daily driver, it really lacks in any kind of modern feature or comfort, and it gets a 1. Comfort is pretty terrible on just about anything but the smoothest of roads, and it earns a 1. Build quality is pretty good. It really doesn't break, and it earns a 7. Practicality is a bit of a one-sided argument. On the one hand, it's very good at schlepping tools, lawnmowers, construction materials, bags of dirt, you name it. On the other hand, it's only just slightly more able to get you to a date, clean and tidy looking, and just because it's just that little bit better than a motorcycle at doing that, it gets a 2. In terms of value, considering that in this country, used vehicles, they hold their value for a very long time, it earns an 8. Adding up the weekend and daily driver categories, we come up with a final score of 41 points. Now, on Doug's tables, that's right in between a Pontiac Aztek and a 2010 Jeep XJ. Now, considering how many people take doors off of a Cherokee to try to make them look cool, it seems like a fairly reasonable score. Summary: this is a vehicle whose age and lack of features and old technology become more apparent with the release of every single new four-wheel drive vehicle, every new generation of Jeep or Land Rover, every new SUV that comes out makes this look old. On the other hand, every new SUV that's launched, FJ Cruiser with its FJ40 looking grille, Suzuki Jimny with its boxy shape, and you can get it in olive green color, Land Rover Defender with its obvious styling cues from the old Defenders and even the series Land Rovers. Every one of those vehicles makes this one more authentic and more real, and in that way, cooler.